I'm so glad that you're here with us. We have power for now. We're going to keep our fingers crossed. I see, folks saying that in the chat as well. So, uh, we're going to roll with the punches today, right? And just be adaptable and flexible as we have been all year. So, uh, welcome to managing the change process. Like Abby said, a year already since we really have had our worlds rocked and had really a tremendous amount of change thrown at us. All at once, coming from a lot of different angles. And not only as individuals that we need to respond and adapt to those changes, managing that and leading that change process is especially difficult with, again, that compounded amount of change. We're used to maybe one or two things happening, whether it be a life event personally and maybe a change at work, and you know you know minor things here and there that sometimes are even difficult on their own when they're not compounded by so much adversity. And again, whether you're affected by the health or loss of a loved one, or the just economy as a whole, whatever the case may be, we're all in this together. We're going to share some tips today around how we can really help manage that better. Again, I know, it's been a little while. We've probably figured out maybe a little bit of what works here and there, but what can we do to focus on helping ourselves individually, but then our teams really kind of work through and adapt to some of these processes that we have had to adapt. And I don't think it's really going to slow down at any point in the game when it comes to how flexible and adaptable that we do need to be. I think we need to kind of stay on our toes because, again, you never know, and we're not out of the woods yet per se. So I'm really glad that you guys are here for this conversation. So just to give you a little bit about my background, again, my name's Kim Hurst. So as we go through the conversation today, like Abby said, if you have any questions, throw them in the chat or Q&A, and she's going to help me monitor that. If again, you want to speak up with anything to share, love to hear from everybody. So you can always unmute if you want to share, if you can. But this is a conversation for you, so definitely make sure you're asking or giving any additional thoughts, because again, we've all had different adversities this year and overcoming them and handling them differently. So good to hear from everybody in terms of how that's been going and anything that we have found that works well. So I've been with Best Care since the end of 2019, right before kind of our worlds did get rocked. But I have worked with Best Care for the majority of my career in different capacities. Typically, my positions have been either in the HR realm or training and development. I've been in operations roles as well early on in my career, started at a credit union and spent about 16 years there, and the last 5 have been in manager HR leadership roles. And I really realized that my passion was in training development, and being able to be in the role that I am at Best Care, I've really found my true passion, I would say, in terms of not just watching people and helping people grow and develop with the resources that we have to offer, but helping so many different partner organizations. And we love our partnership with NAM because you guys in all sorts of different areas of your nonprofit do such amazing work. And so we love to be able to offer our resources up with the partnership that we have. So take that to full advantage. The other big kind of mission that I love being a part of is creating those mental health friendly workplaces. And that's one of the biggest things right now that we're in really great need of is those resources for our people in how to cope with these things, not just change, but the loss and the grief and, you know, things that have been really heavy this year. And so keep that in mind. Make sure, you know, I'll share our information at the end, but, you know, if you know somebody that could utilize more of our services from a mental health standpoint, that's what we're here for. So let's get rolling into managing the change process. So I love some of these visuals. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Dave Deckett. He's our additional training consultant, and he's our curriculum content coordinator. And so he has some awesome pictures when it comes to some of our content. And I feel like that's what this year has been like, trying to push this ginormous boulder up a hill, both ways in the snow, you know, whatever those stories go like. But not only, you know, is change rarely easy, but it's stressful, it's overwhelming. And at the same time, it can really also be very positive. It can be a great opportunity for growth, satisfaction, and really just more opportunity for other chances that we wouldn't have gotten before. I think Abby and I were talking before we started in terms of technology. You know, we've gotten really adept in terms of doing things in different ways, working in different modes and capacities, and we had to adapt quickly, and that's an advantage. That's an opportunity for growth that you know, we all had to adjust to very quickly. So whether it, you know, has been stressful or not for us, you know, it's definitely led to challenges, I'm sure, for everybody. But you know what makes change especially challenging for you as a team leader is that, again, you're almost certainly going to be experiencing the same reactions and situations as your employees during these types of transition periods. And here's the thing: when it comes to reactions and the effect of change, they're normal. It's okay for us to have these reactions, and it's expected. We should be able to prepare ourselves, knowing how to handle some of these things. So that's really where we're going to focus on today in terms of helping keeping our employees on track when it comes to handling those expectations and leading that change. So one of the sad things to think about today, or not to think about, but the difficult piece with change and why so many organizations fail. This little factoid here: 70% of workplace change efforts fall flat because they fail to address people's natural resistance to change. Change is, again, it's not easy. We sometimes fear it. There's a lot of reasons that we resist change. And again, those are natural reactions. So how we cope, how we deal. So as we go through and kind of get started today, I'm going to take a quick really just peek. I'm gonna do a kind of a verbal survey, and I'll share this afterward with Abby. She can send out with the recording in terms of if you want to actually take this self-assessment. But I'm gonna ask you to think through some questions from a self-assessment standpoint of how comfortable you are with change. And then from there, really going into the nature of change and those factors driving it, and remind ourselves of what some of those typical reactions to workplace change are. But more so importantly, the greater piece of the conversation is how we're going to manage those emotional dimensions of change. We can't change the way people feel and react, but how do we respond to that? And how do we lead through those things? So as we get going into our conversation here today, let's do that kind of reflective listening. So you, again, don't have to write down your answers or anything of that nature. If you want to do the self-assessment, it'll be sent later. But I just want you to think about these statements as I read them so that we can kind of just focus our minds around what some of the resistance might be. So as I read through these, just think on a kind of a 3-point scale, often true, rarely true, or some, in the middle, sometimes true. So which end of the spectrum am I on when it comes to how comfortable you are with change? All right, so there's 18 statements. Again, don't have to do anything, but just kind of listen and reflect on how you may feel about each one. All right. Again, often true, rarely true, or sometimes true, kind of in that middle ground. So number 1, I'm glad many changes are occurring at work. 2, new people and methods bring new opportunities. 3, work is less interesting when there is little change. 4, when I understand the new methods at work, I am able to fit in. 5, my creativity comes out more as things need to be done differently. 6, job security can be found in mastering new conditions. 7, a good management team brings new ideas to the job. 8, established ways of doing work can usually be improved. 9, the more experience I have on my job, the more I see how to improve it. 10, uncertainty at work gives me a stronger focus on the job. 11, it is clear to me that there are many ways to achieve most work goals. 12, I value not knowing exactly what my job will be like in the future. 13, meeting present goals should result in more challenging future goals. 14, being flexible and open to change should be a part of one's performance evaluation. 15, I'm at my best when my job demands something new or different. 16, I typically look for new ways to do my job. 17, it would be exciting to have a new job with new things to learn. 18, I'm able to adjust well to different conditions at work. All right, so again, there's a scoring mechanism in this survey or assessment if you do want to take it after the fact, but kind of ranks us on that ability to adjust. How open and adaptable and flexible are we to adjust? And so just curious if, any of those questions stood out to you in terms of, oh gosh, that may be a rough spot for me, or anything that, really just kind of stood out. For me, one of them was, and it's hard, I know probably not seeing them in front of you, but uncertainty at work gives me a stronger focus on the job. To me personally, I would say uncertainty at work makes me a little bit more distracted. That I think uncertainty is difficult to get past when you're not sure of your future, what's going to happen. At the beginning of this, back in, March, April last year, we were all trying to adapt. Most of the training that we do here at Best Care is in person, and really trying to decide how we would be able to respond, what that looked like for our jobs. And, luckily we were able to adapt with the technology and kind of stay at par with that among, all of our partners. But that doesn't mean, again, it was easy or comfortable, right? So there's been a lot of waves through that. So I don't see any comments or anything yet from those questions, but hopefully it gets you thinking a little bit in terms of some of the nature of change and things that we're facing to really think about as we focus. Awesome. Renee says you love change, and I typically like change. I'm a personality. I don't know if any of you are familiar with emergenetics, but my way of thinking is more conceptual. I'm more of a visionary. I like to be creative and like to be innovative. So I don't like a structure, standard, routine day in and day out. I like the flexibility and newness of things. But at the same time, a lot of it can be overwhelming, right? But yeah, you love challenge and hate being bored of my job. I completely agree. And I think, again, it depends. Some people really get comfortable in that routine. I know, especially, humans are natures of habit to begin with. So it just kind of depends on how comfortable we are when it comes to all these really just differences in what's required of us at work. All right, so thanks for kind of listening through those questions. You can kind of see where you rate on the spectrum after the fact if you'd like. But when it comes to the nature of change, let's really kind of define change. And the really easiest definition there is really to our conversation today, any shift or development in a person or organization's external circumstances. Pretty basic, right? Things that are happening outside of us that impact us, right? Now, it again doesn't mean it's easy. There's quite a few different types of change. What we're going to talk about today, keep these in mind because a lot of changes we do plan for, and those would be those designed changes that we truly initiate ourselves. We plan for, we have the capacity to directly influence what is happening, and again, more of that control factor of how that change process goes. Now, I love the picture of the little boy because obviously growth changes, and I think of my kids and how fast they've grown physically, but growth changes are those changes that you experience through personal transformation. So again, whether it be learning a new skill or adapting to a new role or whatever the case may be, those are changes that you can initiate, but depends on the situation, not always necessarily be able to control. So again, educating yourself, working on a new degree or a certification or something like that. Those are things that you make the choice to do, but maybe can't exactly control every single step of the way. Now, those imposed changes, that's what we've been dealing a lot of this year is those things that are happening to us, things that we have little or no control over. And I think, those are difficult on their own, but when they again are really compounded the way they have been in terms of not just our work lives and how we've been working this year, our social lives, the way our family's been influenced, all of those areas in people's lives have had that imposed change that, again, has been really hard to respond to. So a lot of different forces drive change. And again, I don't want to just focus on what this last year has brought us. So, in general, things that we typically see driving workplace change, technology, that innovation, we really have to keep up with that competition out there. And when it comes to how quickly technology changes, I mean, gosh, there's a new iteration of, a smartphone every week, it seems like, when it comes to how quickly things are being produced and marketed, and we are learning new technologies. Now, again, it might depend on the culture in your workplace, how quickly those things happen. I know I've worked in a couple organizations that have been at completely different ends of the spectrum. One company I was at was cutting edge, always on the forefront of something new. And the last organization that I was with was more of a local family-owned business that was really, liking the ways that they'd done things for a long time, but at the same time, it was working how they were doing things, and the need wasn't necessarily there always to adapt from a technology standpoint. So I'm sure we've all been in different varying areas of how each workplace has been driven by technology. But globalization as well. How are we making our workforce more culturally compatible and, again, globalized? We, again, depending on your organization, there's tons of regulations to keep up with. From an HR world, I shouldn't say I'm relieved, but I am a little relieved that I am not in the capacity from a change structure right now to be in an HR role dealing with COVID and everything that has impacted, work comp or FMLA and all of those regulations that, again, we have to keep up with because they're ever changing, especially now as those imposed changes have happened. And so, again, not just necessarily the regulations within our industry, but regulations externally in our environments. Again, how open is our marketplace right now? Those kinds of things. And again, those efforts that we really have to take to increase productivity and quality while decreasing our operating costs. Those initiatives are really imperative when it comes to making it work for the goods and services that we all deliver, to make sure that we're running an effective and efficient business, right? So those are types of change. Again, we've all probably experienced the differences, but let's now talk about what we've seen. And I want you guys, as we kind of go through some of these, throw in the chat, what are you seeing the most of? And, and maybe at the end, after we get through these, we pause and have a little discussion on the most typical responses you're seeing right now to different changes. So typically, we're going to see a couple different ways that people will react, whether it be active responses or passive responses. And you obviously know active is truly more of that action, whereas passive is more of a withdrawn, not so much of an action. So, oops, I keep hitting my my enter button. So our active responses to change, and you may see people or know people or even be one of those individuals that just have true, utter opposition. I am putting my foot down. I am going to drag, go kicking and screaming the entire way because I am truly opposed to this kind of change. I've seen that a lot. Again, like the organization that I was talking about. Nope, we've done it this way forever. We don't need to change. I'm utterly opposed to this type of change. And again, there may be good reasons. One of the active things that we'll see from ourselves and other individuals is that reduced productivity. We may not be able to keep up with a new way of doing something, or again, just that distraction or lack of focus based on it being an imposed change. I'm sure we all hear this, but a lot of complaining or whining, maybe even some bickering or quarreling when it comes to disagreeing about some of these changes. People may be picking fights. I know for myself, when I was at the credit union that I worked at for a long time, I knew our old school system. It was, now I'm really going to age myself, but it was a DOS prompt command system. So basically, to do a teller function, you would have to know the codes. Well, I started there when I was 16, and these changes started occurring when I was in my early 20s. And I had been doing something for so long, like the back of my hand, I could do it with my eyes closed. And, I was a little bit bitter that all of that knowledge was going to go away. And so, yeah, I was complaining. I know that some of the old school, per se, employees and I were, just kind of, I wouldn't necessarily say quarreling, but really just frustrated with the changes and not on board per se. But a lot of these active responses, we see people truly getting hung up on what the problems are and just too focused on what the problem is rather than focusing on the solution and the adaptation to a change. Agitation, blaming others, spreading rumors. And, I know that was one of the things. And I was very young and very immature in that role when I was at the credit union, in terms of this isn't going to work. This isn't going to go well. And not necessarily rumors, but not having that buy-in, right? So, and those conversations, they spread like wildfire, and they're really disruptive to the work, and again, to that culture that we want to have in our organizations of seeing things as opportunities rather than a problem. So what are some of those passive responses that we see? And again, these are things that you may not notice. They're done on kind of the down low, but people are just failing to participate. And it's not a forefront, huge action, but we're seeing just we're not getting people to do it the new way, or take part in whatever that change initiative is. Frequent mistakes, especially when we're learning something new, we have to be ready for that mistake and that kind of room for error as we learn and as we grow. Some of that pouting, I know I've seen this with my kids when whatever may be happening and I make a change, they're not outright disagreeing with me, but go mope and whine around and be more apathetic. Not investigating and problem solving, again, not necessarily dwelling on the problem, but really not trying to help get involved with solving those problems either. And just staying quiet or, distanced, withdrawn, kind of in their own heads. They're maybe not stirring the pot, but having that quiet resistance, that it's not going to go well. They're blaming others or listening to rumors, whatever the case may be. So there's a lot that really kind of we can see in all areas. And here's the thing, there's a lot of things behind these responses. Our own self-interest, like I was saying, the habits that we have, the time savers. I know all the little hacks in that old system, and now I've got to learn this new way of doing things. I'm concerned about the effect that it might have on the company. I'm concerned about how we're going to be able to help our clients or our customers in this way. And a lot of times that nostalgia, again, going back to my experience at the credit union, there was quite a few of us where we were like, oh, but this was so easy then. And oh, I missed this. And oh, we really get kind of hung up on how things used to be and wanting to hang on to the past in certain situations. Because again, we are creatures of habit, and we like, as much as we may like to do things different and kind of keep up at not the same type of structured day, we do like those routine processes because it's easy. And a lot of that motivation is, this is happening to me, that victimhood, right? I don't have control of what's happening. And again, it can lead to any of those passive or active responses that we talked about. So I want to pause here for a moment and kind of hear from you guys. What in the last, year or however long that you would say you've been most affected by recent change, or if you have a specific change initiative going on at work right now that you're working through, what are some of those responses that you guys are seeing? And I can kind of go back and keep the active responses up for you to think about or speak to. And then I'll put the passive back up as well. I know we didn't all lose power, right? It's not just crickets from my end, I hope. The passive, the apathy. Thanks, Abby and Tracy. More of the passive. And again, we all have different personalities. People react in their own ways. I'm just curious to see more of what you guys are experiencing, or how you are handling things. Maybe not what you're seeing from others. Kitty, I love it. Hibernation. Yes. That remaining aloof and withdrawn. And yes, hibernation just sounds great right now, right? Awesome. Well, I appreciate you guys sharing a few of your thoughts. If anybody else has anything, don't hesitate. Hard to focus on solutions because worried about the change and how it affects clients, families. Definitely. Yeah, I think for a while there in April, May timeframe, we were. I wouldn't say I was worried about my job, but in the back of my head, gosh, if we're not having training requests, other companies aren't doing training, what is that going to look like for us? Especially with the health system at Methodist having so much impact by the other things that were happening in the healthcare realm, how that would make us a little bit more irrelevant maybe. But also I know I had a very hard time personally responding and coping with changes going on here because of changes going on in my home. I was telling Abby before we started, my daughter was a senior in high school at the end of, or when really kind of all of this started. So she graduated in May, technically, 2020. But watching her go through these changes and have to respond to them at 18 years old, and the loss of things and the tradition of graduation and prom and those kinds of things, definitely hard to watch. So I appreciate you guys sharing and your thoughts, and let's talk now about really how we work to manage that based on the emotional dimensions of the change. So here's the biggest thing that we want to talk about today as we talk about change. Things change, circumstances change, but people, on the other hand, as individuals and humans, we transition. And those are very different things. And even though the differences are subtle, understanding that is important if we want to be able to manage that effectively. Because again, it may look similar from the outside, but the way we transition is not as simple as how things change. So let's talk about the differences between changes and transitions. Changes happen externally, like we defined that word change as something happening to us, right? I'm gonna read that again so we have that in front of us. Any shift or development in a person or organization's external circumstances. So those things happening external to us, again, anything that can impact us, but it's happening around us, it's happening externally. Whereas the way we respond and our emotions, those are very internal types of transitions. And that involves a lot of thought and a lot of emotion. Whereas the changes are really only circumstantial and fact-based in terms of how things are happening. Now we have to process this, and this is an emotional reaction, right? There's so many thoughts and emotions that go into what is going on. Just like what Kelly said, the change happening here makes it hard to focus because of the worry and how things will affect each other, our families and our clients. So whereas change isn't impersonal, it's this external factor that's happening. Again, a lot of these imposed changes that have been put upon us this year, that is intensely personal to us, right? We have all had very different personal circumstances that have arisen based on the type of transition that we have had to make with these changes. And again, senior graduation or lacking graduation, our family's health, potentially losing a loved one. For anybody that's lost a loved one, my condolences. That's, I use my daughter's graduation as my example because luckily that's the worst it's been for us, her grief with that. And I know that may sound silly to others, but it's a hard time in your life. And if that's the worst it gets, I'm okay with it. We've been lucky from a health standpoint. My son did have COVID and luckily wasn't an extreme case. But again, we've all been impacted differently. These changes, again, are very event driven and can happen quickly. As we know, one day things seem somewhat normal. The next day, the city's closed down, right? And these transitions are very process driven. How are we going to have that snowball effect on our lives with these event driven impacts? And these take time to respond to, right? We really need to be able to acknowledge and understand and adapt to these imposed upon changes, or even, again, non-imposed changes. Growth, the planned change, losing my words now, our designed change, all of those things even still need that transitional effect on people, have that transitional effect on people. So how do we utilize our management skills to help these transitions? Because again, it's not easy, and successful transitions demand really strong leadership and stress management skills, especially when it comes to certain activities. So first and foremost, again, I know some of these easier said than done, so take that with a grain of salt. But modeling positive change related attitudes. How can we walk the talk and stay positive with that change in mind, so that we can really help inspire our teams and others with what benefits we're going to get out of it? What is that vision? Reminding ourselves of what's going to come from this process, or what has come from this process. We did a 2020 reflection for our entire team here at Best Care. If you don't follow us on LinkedIn, you'll have to go follow us on LinkedIn and check out some of our reflections, because we all shared what we've learned from 2020, and most of those things were silver lining, right? What we've been able to do in spite of or because of some of these changes. Yes, I agree. Change is a painful process like birth, but oh so uplifting when managed well. I completely agree. So how can we lead that positive, inspirational type of change? And one of the ways that we can do it is really trying new things, experimenting with new ways of getting things done. I think sometimes we all get so set on making sure something is the right answer and the right response to something. And we work so hard on planning it and maybe initiating it in a response format, whereas we just need to play and practice different iterations and experiment with, okay, that didn't work, let's try it this way. We have a few different team type of activities here that we do at Best Care, and one of them is they call it it's not the s'mores challenge, it's a spaghetti tower challenge, but I'll have to think of the website to share, but there's a whole website, because this is a team activity where it's very interesting to watch a small group of individuals try to build the tallest tower out of 10 sticks of spaghetti, some string, some tape, and have to place a jumbo marshmallow at the top without it falling over at the end. And the interesting thing about this, it's called the Marshmallow Challenge. That's what it's called. Sorry, I'm having a little slow brain moment this morning. Thanks, Abby. The Marshmallow Challenge. I appreciate it. The innovation that's required to doing well at that is so interesting, and it takes a lot of experimenting. And the really interesting and funny thing about that is people in the business world aren't so good at experimenting. We're trained, especially when it comes to school and different thoughts of the business world, having that one right way and planning that out and seeing it through to the end. Now, the best individuals that do the best, or the individuals that do the best at this Marshmallow Challenge, if you've never seen it, there's a whole TED talk on it. You'll have to check it out. But check out that website that Abby shared. They're kindergartners. The kindergartners do this so well because they just play, they try, they experiment, and they learn from their mistakes that are made during that experimental process, and they accept it. And from a leadership standpoint, we need to allow that. Now, I know certain types of businesses, we can't experiment on everything, and there's, kind of boundaries for that. But, what our leader here at EAP has done on our ed services side, Robin has just said, let's try it. Let's do this for a month and see how it goes. We've started these monthly open training sessions that have gotten really great responses. And it was just one of those things in a response to the pandemic, in terms of, we're not doing all of this other training. Let's do something else for the communities that we're in. So see what we can play with. But empower others to do the same. If you have that leadership stance and ability to say, you know what, there's not one right or wrong way. Let's try to do things differently and see what we can come up with. And I think the most effective way to lead through this is really encouraging people sincerely, genuinely, and, from the heart, in ways that are meaningful to them. So when it comes to things that are meaningful to them, you may really have to get to know your people better, to know how they're doing, to understand what is meaningful to them. So some of the transition processes that we're going to see, everybody transitions differently. So as we've talked about these external change, how people are really grasping and internalizing this, we're going to pass through a series of fairly predictable stages. And each one of these stages is characterized by a set of feelings and behaviors that can be successfully navigated as we're going to discuss here. So keep in mind, again, some of these stages others have more difficulty with than others. And that's where best care can come in, when it comes to, if there's certain situation that people are having trouble dealing with that transition process. We have our short-term counseling. We have other different options. So let's look at these characteristics of the transition. So first thing, really vulnerable feelings are really going to be that first reaction to news of an impending change or things that are being imposed upon us. And these are triggered by things that we perceive that we're going to be losing, that sense of loss. And, you might feel that you're not able to protect yourself from the impact of this change. And that makes it really difficult. So those first reactions are hard. So how can we help to cope with that? Talk about it. I think that passive response by withdrawing and, hibernating and things like that, it doesn't help us transition through these stages. So talk with somebody that you trust, and really focus on the aspects of the situation that we do have some measure of control over. Because I think right now, in the midst of so much change and things that we don't have control over, we really have to focus on what we can control and not worry and ruminate on the things that we can't. So our next step is apprehension. These are things, unpleasant feelings associated with this uncertainty are going to be manifested. We may see those angry outbursts, blaming, withdrawal, again, reduced productivity, motivation, some of those things in this stage. And this is seen when that reality is setting in. And we're potentially seeing some of those ramifications of the change. And if the circumstances are really still up in the air, you might still feel stuck or in limbo. And again, that lack of sense of control. So again, tips for coping, focus on what you can control. I know that sounds iterative, but at the same time, when we focus on those things, it gives us more power to do things in reaction to truly what we can and what we do have control over. And we just have to accept the fact that there's going to be a lot of uncertainty right now, and realize, what, it's okay that I don't know what's going to happen next week. It's, maybe difficult, but I have to accept that I'm not going to have a well-oiled plan for the next, uncertain future. Our next stage is that exploration, feeling caught between the old and the new processes, those two worlds that we can kind of get caught between. And you begin to try new things and let go of old routines, which is good. We want to focus on the present and the future and help seek out that information as the situation evolves. So learning as much as we can about the change at hand, make sure we're keeping our sources credible. Again, depends on the situation. But reminding ourselves that it's going to take time. Those transitions take lots more time to evolve than just saying, okay, the change is in place. We need to now adapt to it. So make sure you give that time before making any decisions that are going to affect your life in the long term. I've seen a lot of people make very hasty career changes based on one change that they're reacting to, and they're just not transitioning through a process where they could have really flourished after the fact had they kind of stuck in there a little bit longer. So adaptation, yes, our adaptation. We're done exploring now, and we feel ready to move on. We're getting ready to accept things as they are, and I'm getting new attitudes and perspectives about the situation, myself, the organization, and really just the whole change overall. And this is a good stage to be in, but stay courteous to others. Not everybody is going to be in this phase at the same time as you. Continue to propose solutions rather than gripe, and avoid complaining or gossiping, backstabbing about others that aren't in that same phase of the transition process. Keep your sense of humor. Have fun with things. Involve your management to involve workers and give them more time to transition. But as you may be adapting more, somebody may be still struggling. So offer that emotional support. Keep learning and growing about the new process as much as you can. And so, again, these responses to the emotions of others, we mentioned some of those things that we may see, the anger. Let people vent privately. Let them express themselves, but have appropriate limits. Don't be intimidated. Don't take it personally, but show that you care. And here's the thing. We're not experts as managers when it comes to other people's emotions. It's not that I don't care, but you know what? I might want to refer you to EAP or talk to whatever the whoever you might be comfortable talking with. But there's certain things you can say. Yeah, you definitely have a right to be angry. This is difficult for all of us. You seem upset. Would you like to take a few minutes to collect your thoughts and we can talk more later? Obviously, if anybody's really kind of out of control from a physical or verbal threatening standpoint, obviously contact HR or your manager. We're not going to allow that kind of anger to surface. But we may see a lot of fear as well. So that risk avoidance, suspicion, all of those kinds of things. Acknowledge that fears are valid, be honest, provide as much information as possible, and encourage those questions. But be genuine, realistic, offering that reassurance. Another couple ideas of what to say. Yeah, we're all feeling anxious right now. It's hard to know exactly how these changes will work out. Please keep sharing your concerns with me. I'll always answer your questions the best that I can. And I think it's important, again, just to talk about these things. The more people feel that they're not alone in something, the better they feel. Again, there's been a lot of sadness. There's been a lot of grief because, again, different changes and transitions have impacted all sorts of individuals in different ways. But, keep an eye out for changes in their performance, behavior, attendance, involvement, increased mistakes, obviously, outward emotions that you may see. Try not to, pep talk it up, but just listen and empathize. Be respectful about things, but, emphasize the need to keep doing the job as well as possible, with whatever other assistance that you can give. This is a difficult time for all of us. That's why we really need you here right now. Again, dependent on what that individual is going through. I know it's hard to let go and move on. How can we be empathetic to those situations? Again, a lot of the withdrawal, we're seeing a lot of that, but people not asking questions, that apathy, reduced interactions, but seek people out. Again, I know we're not having a lot of physical interaction, but that doesn't mean we can't call, instant message, have another video chat, whatever the case may be, to seek people out and ask them how they're doing. Make sure we know that mistakes are forgivable. We are all allowed mistakes. We're human, but we want to continue to learn and grow as work progresses. But show our care and concern. Again, appreciate their value to the company. Emphasize how much you appreciate their value to the company. You've been pretty quiet since this has happened. How are you doing? What questions can I answer for you? Or, how can I assist? One of my favorite things that I've heard from kind of an HR standpoint is, again, I can't fix people's problems, but I care, and I really want to see the best for you. And that sometimes mean handling it to an expert, handing that over to an expert. So, you know what, I may not be the right person to talk to about this. You may want to talk to, HR or EAP, whatever the case may be. So in general, our response here kind of summed up, communicate, stay as empathetic as possible, stay genuine, give people a little bit of grace, but still have those realistic expectations and make sure people understand those expectations. We really want to empower our workers to do what they need to do to get through something. And sometimes that might mean, a different flexibility and schedule, or, how the work is getting done. But as long as it's getting done and that meets the expectations, I think that's really the most important point sometimes. But be that leader, manage your own stress, right? We need to make sure that we are walking the talk, because if we can't take care of ourselves, we can't really lead effectively either. So I know that's a lot to handle in an hour time frame. Again, just remember, we can accept that it's rarely easy, and we'll get through it. We will transition accordingly. But I want to kind of open it up now. I know we're wrapping up at the end of time, but this is how you can get a hold of Best Care should you need to refer or utilize our services. But any questions or comments at this point, I'd love to hear from you guys and see anything that you'd like to add to the conversation here.
Thank you so much, Kim. And like Kim said, please feel free to send any questions or comments in the chat. We'll stay on for a minute or two and monitor those and respond. I did just post in the chat the link to the page about NAO's partnership with Best Care. So if you're a NAM member, you can get some discounted rates with Best Care, different partnerships. So make sure to check that out and email me if you have any questions. And yes, we will be sending out the recording of this afterwards. It takes me a little bit to get it uploaded to the private YouTube link and et cetera, but I should have it to you by this afternoon, assuming power stays on. So check your emails and we will get that to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I'll send you the handout to send along, Abby, if that's okay,
Yep.
as well as a survey. We want to get feedback from you guys, good, bad, and different. You know, what works well. We can't grow and do better, and I personally can't grow and do better without knowing that feedback. So I do appreciate you all, and grateful that I was able to be with you today. And I really hope you all stay safe today. Stay warm, check in on each other, take care of your neighbors and friends and family members. I really will keep praying for the best, that everybody fares through today. And we're on the downhill now. It's all going to get better from after today, right?
Yes, the temperatures look promising, so I'm happy. Well, thank you so much, Kim. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this morning. Again, stay warm. Keep an eye on your emails this afternoon, and I will get you all the materials and surveys. So thank you all, and have a great day.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Take care.